Well, the NFL Draft is tonight, and for the first time, in 3 years, but first time after the last couple of drafts, you're not going to hear any Pitt players' names called tonight on the first night of the draft. You might not even hear any called tomorrow. It could be a little bit of a surprise. I don't know, maybe somebody jumps in to the third round, but it's going to be a bit of a barren draft pool for Pitt this season, this year in the NFL Draft. I mean, I think we've all known that for a while. I think everybody's been aware of who Pitt has available going in the NFL and kind of who stacks up as a legitimate pro prospect and who is likely to get selected in the draft this year, the 2024 NFL Draft. But the question is, why? Why is Pitt so low in terms of draft prospects this year? Is it the transfer portal? Is it the COVID year? Is it just a bad team and that's why they went 3-9 last year? Is it probably a combination of all of those things and a few others that we haven't really talked about yet, or at least didn't list there? And the answer is yes. It's all of those things. There's a lot that goes into determining whether or not a team ends up, or not determining, but there are a lot of sources or reasons why a team might end up with a lot of draft prospects or not many. And after some really good draft classes for Pitt over the last really 3 years. They've had 14 guys drafted in the last 3 years. This year's going to be a low one, a quiet one. And we're going to talk about why on today's Morning Pitt. We're also going to get into a very important development on the NIL front, something that's big, and it ties into an ongoing conversation we've been having here. I feel like there's a payoff if you watch these Morning Pitt videos every day, or if you listen to the audio podcast, but we prefer if you watch the video. I feel like there's a payoff if you watch these Morning Pitt videos every day, that there are ongoing conversations and discussion topics that we have. And there's one that we've been having about NIL off and on for the past few months and probably longer. And Pitt took a big step yesterday in bridging some of the gaps that we've discussed right here, and maybe even kind of took up some of the ideas that we've talked about. I mean, it's not like we were the only ones thinking they needed to do some of these things, but they finally did it. And I think it's a big step for Pitt's NIL operation with the Alliance 412 and everything that sort of goes along with that. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the NFL Draft and anything else that comes up here on the Morning Pitt, the Thursday edition, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, listen, there's less than a week until the end of April. I mean, I had a goal. I wanted to get to 4,000 subscribers here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com before the end of April. And somehow we're still like 20 short. All right. I stopped promoting it all the time and doing all the ad reads of like and subscribe and all the things we do here. You guys kept telling me, stop talking about that stuff. Stop saying all that stuff. I'm tired of hearing it. All right, well, so I moved it around. I broke it up a little bit more. I stopped doing it all the time. You still haven't helped me out. Like, you make me go back to the original, the way I used to do these intros where we come out of the intro music and I'd spend 3 minutes talking about the website and talking about, our the podcast and the YouTube page and all that stuff. So click the subscribe button. All right, that's all I'm asking you to do. Click the subscribe button and help us get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of the month. That's an arbitrary goal that I set, and I would really like to see us hit it. And plus, if you subscribe, then you won't miss any of our content, any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's where we put all these Morning Pitt videos, our weekly live show like we had last night with Jim Hammett and me, talking about Pitt sports with you and anything else that we do video-wise. And we tend to have a lot, particularly during the season and even during the off-season. So like this video and subscribe. That would make me real happy. And, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of your Pitt sports news. Draft stuff. Let's talk about the NFL Draft and where Pitt stacks up and how this draft is looking for Pitt. I mean, you're coming into the 2024 NFL Draft with, coming off one of the best 3-year runs that Pitt has had in a long time. The 2014 draft, they had 3 guys drafted that year, 5 the year before, and 2 the year before that. So that's pretty good. That's 10 guys over the course of 3 years. Just kind of scrolling back through 2004, they had 6 guys drafted, 3 the year before that, and 3 the year before that. So that's 12 guys drafted over the course of 3 years. 1990, 89, and 88 was pretty strong. Now, the draft was longer that year. They had, went to, they had guys getting drafted in like the 11th round, and so you get more numbers. But since they went to this 7-round format, and I don't know what year they did that, somewhere in the mid-1990s, you're pretty much looking at the last 3 years as the best run of draft picks that Pitt has had. They've had 14 guys drafted over the last 3 classes with Kalijah Cansey and Carter Warren and Izzy Abanikanda and Servassier Dennis and Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill last year, Kenny Pickett and Damari Mathis in 2022, and then Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver, Jason Pinnock, Jalen Twyman, DeMar Hamlin, and Jimmy Morrissey in 2021. 14 guys over the course of 3 years. And like I say, I mean, in terms of a 7-round draft, that's about as good as Pitt has done in a long, long time. Now, even 90, 89, and 88, I mean, they still had a ton of guys drafted. Of course, the 1981 draft, if you roll the clock back to there, they had 6, 9, 10, 11 guys drafted just in the first 5 rounds. And then it was sort of something similar 2 years later in 83 with Tim Lewis and Jimbo Curvert and Dan Marino when they had, count here, 6 guys drafted in the first 6 rounds. And so they've had really good runs of draft picks. It's tough to compare when you talk about a draft that goes into 11 or 14 rounds or whatever it went into back then. But in terms of a 7-round draft, the last 3 years, just in terms, as far as numbers drafted, has been as good as Pitt has done maybe ever. I mean, certainly in a long time. I mean, those draft picks in the early 1980s with all those 11-1 teams, I mean, there's a direct correlation between 3 seasons in a row going 11-1 and producing like a ton of draft picks and first-round draft picks. It's not an accident. You know what I mean? It's not coincidental that the 2021 Pitt team won the ACC championship with 3 first-round draft picks playing for it. I mean, with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison and Kalijah Cansey, is not a coincidence. I mean, these things often line up, and then you add in more draft picks in Izzy Abanikanda, even if he was misused and underused that year, Carter Warren and Servassier Dennis and Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett, and the list goes on and on. I think Damari Mathis was on that team. He didn't play in the Peach Bowl. I don't even know if he played in the ACC. I think he played in the ACC championship game, but you get the point, right? That if you got a lot of draft picks, usually that correlates with team success. It's very rare that teams have a lot of draft picks and don't produce a lot of success, although some of Dave Wanstead's first few teams ended up with draft picks and only had 1 good year or 2 good years. Now, I will say, before we dive too far into sort of the why behind Pitt's drop in the draft this year, I will say that, I think there's a lot of fans have drawn a connection between the lower level of NFL talent on the roster and the 3-9 record. They're like, well, maybe that's why you went 3-9, because you didn't have those guys. And to some extent, I agree. You know what I mean? To some extent, yeah. 2022, they were helped in great deal by having Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett and Kalijah Cansey. I don't think there's any question about that. And Matt Gonsalves, for that matter. And Izzy Abanikanda. These are draft picks. Gonsalves hasn't been drafted. Yeah, we'll talk about him and his prospects in a second. I'm not going to say there's no correlation there. I mean, I think there is some connection. I think, yeah, that helped that team go 9-4. Last year's team went 3-9, partially because they had some drop off in terms of the NFL talent, but mostly, or almost entirely, because of the abysmal offense led by abysmal quarterback play. I mean, that was the difference. And I mean, we've gone down this road a lot in the past, talked about, boy, where would they have been if Nate Yarnell started all year, or if Christian Bayer started all year? I mean, they wouldn't have gone 3-9. They might not have gone 9-4 again. Maybe they only go 7-5 in the regular season, but they do better than 3-9. They don't have a losing record. They make a bowl game. I'm as confident of that as anything. That if they start Nate Yarnell all season, or even if they start Christian Bayer all season, they make a bowl game at the very least, which is really the bottom of the barrel in terms of achievements in college football. But they do that. They're able to pull that off if they have just less than abysmal quarterback play. Now, the abysmal offense, I mean, in 2022, they had Izzy Abanikanda. That helps. Matt Gonsalves played all season. That helps. But it really is about the quarterback play. I mean, when you want to look for explanations for why they went 3-9, and you can find a lot of different things, but you really can't go past the quarterback situation. You can't get too far past that and talk about other things, and spend too much time on the other things before you get to the quarterback situation. So there is some correlation with NFL talent and the 3-9 record that they had last year, but not entirely. unless you want to say, well, if they had NFL talent at quarterback, they wouldn't have gone 3-9, which, as I have said, if they had just average talent at quarterback, they wouldn't have gone 3-9. But that's that. Looking at some of the latest draft projections, I looked at WalterFootball.com because they pretty consistently update their 7-round mock draft, and it was Charlie Campbell did a 7-round mock draft that he updated on Tuesday. And if he updated it more recently than that, I apologize for not checking. But he had Matt Gonsalves going to Seattle in the 4th round, pick 118 overall. He had MJ Devonshire going to Buffalo in the 6th round, pick 200 overall. And he had Bub Means staying in the AFC North, going to Cleveland in round 6 at pick 206. So 6 picks after MJ Devonshire. I like that Devonshire picked to Buffalo because the Bills have gotten a few Pitt defensive backs, Damar Hamlin and Dane Jackson. And so I like the idea of the Bills going back to that well to try and get another talented Pitt DB. But that was sort of the latest projection. You see different things. I think Mel Kiper seems to be really high on Bub Means. Outside of the obvious top guys, he really likes Bub Means. And I think there was even talk about him being a 3rd-round pick or something. I mean, we'll see. I think there are a lot of question marks there. I think it has to be the right team who's in the right spot to take a flyer on a guy. Because I think there is some risk inherent with Bub Means. I mean, look, you know me. I drove the Bub Means hype train all year last year, and it paid off. I think it paid off over the final 8 games or so, where he was, put up great stat lines. What were those numbers we always came up with? He was on pace for like 900 or 1,000 yards and, double-digit touchdowns and all 70 catches or something like that with the pace that he played at over the final 8 games. But I mean, there's still questions about consistency and how refined he is and all that. But there's no doubt about the physical tools. And like I say, you'll never catch me saying a bad word about Bub Means. I'm on board with that all day. But I don't know if, like I say, I mean, a team has to be willing to take those risks. A team has to be willing to roll the dice a little bit, which means they have to be in the right kind of position. Maybe a team that's drafting at the bottom of a round, you know what I mean? A playoff team or a conference championship game participant who says, okay, we're kind of set, not really thrilled about any of these options. Let's roll the dice. I think this guy, there's a really high upside. And it might not work. It's pretty low floor, but there's a pretty high upside with Bub Means. And so Walter Football had him as a 6th-round pick. He could go sooner than that. He's not going to go tonight. I don't really know if he's going to go tomorrow, to be honest with you, but that's neither here nor there. How did it drop like this, though? Where you have back-to-back years with first-round draft picks, you have 14 guys drafted over the course of 3 years, and now you're looking at maybe your first pick going in the 4th round. How did the numbers drop like that? And the answer, as always, is in recruiting. Right? If you think about the classes that should provide this year's NFL draft talent, right? The classes, the recruiting classes that should bring these guys to Pitt, or should be the origin of the players who are going to the draft this year. So the class of 2019, these would be guys who just finished up their 5th year. They would be, 5 years at Pitt and going to the NFL. Servassier Dennis is already there out of that class, so that's a good one. So is Kalijah Cansey. That's a good one. And Matt Gonsalves should go this year. Other than that, I'm not sure. Oh, and Brandon Hill. Brandon Hill went to the NFL. So that's, 1, 2, 3, 4 draft picks out of the class, which is not a bad number, really. They signed 19 guys in that class. If you get 4 draft picks out of a 19-man class, that's pretty solid. That's not bad. Of course, Dennis, Hill, and Cansey were not on the 2023 team, so that doesn't help you with last year, and those 3 guys are not a part of this 2024 NFL draft class. AJ Woods maybe has a chance, but really that's it from that class. So you're looking at, from the 2019 class, which would be the oldest guys from that class, maybe 1 gets drafted in Gonsalves. You roll forward to the 2020 class. Now, these are the guys who would be, they would have played 4 years at Pitt, right? The 2020, 21, 22, and 23 season. They're going into the NFL after their 4th year at Pitt. And, you've got Izzy Abanikanda and Jordan Addison, who both went to the NFL early. So you take those guys out of the mix. And that's it from this group. I mean, that's it. As far as guys who could get drafted this year, I mean, a lot of these guys are still in school, going for a fifth year of college. Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara already transferred. Jalen Barden transferred. I mean, those, Dayon Hayes transferred out of that class. I mean, those are guys who legitimately might have a chance. They're all still in college and transferred and not at Pitt anymore, so they're not going to be part of the draft class this year. And that's kind of it. So you ended up with 2 draft picks so far out of that 2020 class, and really, outside of maybe Branson Taylor, nobody else who looks like they're going to be a draft pick from that class. And maybe somebody surprises, maybe like Rashad Battle has a big breakout season this year or something, but doesn't really look like you're going to get another draft pick there. And then early entries to the NFL, the 2021 recruiting class. These are guys who, if they went into this year's draft, they would have left after 3 years at Pitt. There's nobody. I mean, there is nobody. There's a lot of guys out of this 2021 recruiting class who have transferred. A handful of them are still here. A lot of these guys left Pitt, transferred to another school. Cole Mitchell, Naquan Brown, Kyle Fugetti never even made it. Trey Anderson, Stephon Hall, Khalil Anderson, Malik Newton never made it. Preston Levant transferred. Miles Alston transferred. Jaden Bradley. I'm sorry, when I was talking about that last class, I think I was talking about Jalen Barden. I think I read it as Jaden Bradley. Either way. So a lot of those guys have transferred out, and none of them are early entrants to the NFL. Nobody's leaving after 3 years out of that group. Maybe if Gavin Bartholomew had been used better, he could have been an early entry into the NFL. But there's nobody in that group that jumps out to you and you say, yeah, I could say that. There's nobody from that class who went into the NFL early. And so you talk about what happened to their draft class? Why isn't this year's draft class as strong as the last 3 years? Well, I mean, look at the recruiting. Look at the 3 recruiting classes that should provide Pitt's NFL prospects for the 2024 NFL Draft. There's not a lot there. I mean, the 3 guys we're talking about getting drafted, Matt Gonsalves was recruited in the 2019 recruiting class. MJ Devonshire and Bub Meads were both transfers. So even those guys weren't recruited to Pitt. And so you have 1 recruited guy out of the 2019, 20, and 21 classes who now granted, you had Izzy Abanikanda and Kalijah Cansey and Servassier Dennis. I mean, some of these guys were drafted. They didn't play the full 5 years or 4 years. But when you look at what's left from those classes, it's not a lot. It's pretty slim pickings. So that's a big part of it, is the recruiting not so hot in those classes. Some highs, some real highs, no question about it. Abanikanda, Dennis, Jordan Addison, Kalijah Cansey. I mean, there were really good players in there, but the top end. But there is no depth from those classes. And this is what you're relying on for the 2024 roster. So that's a happy thought. All right, the NIL thing I wanted to get to. I wanted to talk about here. We talked about the draft longer than I expected, but the NIL thing that I wanted to talk about, it was a tweet that came out from Pitt yesterday. It came out from the official Pitt football Twitter account, and if I did the technology right, you are going to be able to watch and listen to the video right here.
The world of college athletics is changing. In these days, you've got to have a strong NIL collective if you want to compete. Our goal at Pitt isn't just to compete, it's to win an ACC and national championship. Your support of Alliance 412, the Panthers' official collective, can make that goal a reality.
Rodney Hammond Jr. breaks free in the secondary. A foot race. Touchdown, Rodney Hammond.
Show your Pitt pride. Go to Alliance412.com today and become a member. Help us compete for a spot in the college football playoffs. Thanks for supporting Alliance 412 and hail to Pitt.
Okay, I hope that worked, and I hope you were able to see it, and I hope you were able to listen to it, and I hope you know what that was. That was Pat Narduzzi cutting a promo for Alliance 412. Straight up, on camera, reading a script saying you need to donate to Alliance 412 so we can win football games. And that's something that has not happened. Now, Narduzzi has been involved in Alliance 412 videos or photos before, but he's not gone on camera and talked like he did right there in the tweet that Pitt sent out yesterday. He has not been that forward about it to say, we need your support in order to win games. Saying, and this wasn't in the script, we need you to pay our players so we can win games. Now, I know there's a lot of people who watch these videos who say, I don't like it. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to pay the players. It shouldn't be my responsibility. And that's fine, man. Vaya con Dios. But the reality is, and again, this is what the system is. Okay, and if Pitt is going to maximize what it can do in the system, if they're going to capitalize on the opportunities that the system provides, and I use the word system loosely, as you know, I don't think there's much of a system at all. But just to generally refer to all of this, we call it the system. And if Pitt is going to capitalize on the opportunities that the system provides, if Pitt is going to survive and potentially excel in this system, then the fans have to support it. Or some fans have to support it. There has to be some level of fan support, or else Pitt's going to fail. And to this point, we have not seen Pat Narduzzi be that forward about it. We've seen other schools get on board. We've seen other schools make big pushes for their collectives and NIL funds and donations and things like that. We've seen other schools do this. And I made a big deal about the fact that they invited Alliance 412 donors to Pitt's scrimmage during spring camp, a closed scrimmage, and what that meant and what that said about Pitt sort of buying in to endorsing Alliance 412 and the buy-in that had to come from up on high all the way down through Pat Narduzzi. Well, now Narduzzi speaking publicly like this, cutting a promo for Alliance 412, I think is a big step for Pitt's NIL efforts. It's a big step and a big acknowledgement for Pat Narduzzi. And I don't think it came easily. I mean, obviously, if it had come easily, he would have done it a long time ago. But he did it. And he waited a little too long, probably. But he did it now. And I don't know if that tweet is going to motivate fans. But as a symbol of Pitt's official support for the NIL efforts of the Alliance 412 collective, I think it's huge. It's huge because Alliance 412 needs support from Pitt, needs the official Pitt administration to be behind their efforts because it helps a lot. You know what I mean? The whole operation becomes a lot more manageable and I think effective if you've got the athletic department behind you, the administration behind you, the head football coach behind you. And with that video, Pat Narduzzi was saying, I'm behind it. So I think that was big. All right. Tomorrow we got our mailbag. If you haven't submitted a question yet, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board, and you can post your question in our mailbag thread. And we'll answer as many as we can tomorrow. So thanks for doing that, and check out the site while you're there. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to get all of your Pitt video content as always. We'll have the mailbag tomorrow. Looking forward to it. And until then, enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Hope you've had a great week so far. We'll wrap it up tomorrow with the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.